There we are. Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome and happy Friday. This is certainly my social highlight of the week, so I'm really excited to be here with you. My name's Bianca. I'm an avid reader events host, and I'll just sort of be in the background a little bit this evening, taking care of the technical side of things. And it's my job also to introduce our MC for this evening, Cass Moriarty. Now, just very briefly, before I get to introductions, I'll just do a little bit of housekeeping. So for those of you who may not have joined an Avid Reader or Zoom event, the technical side of things, we can't assist with too much because everyone's device or setup is slightly different. However, you will be able to communicate with us as you will be on mute for the duration of the conversation, just to minimize any disruptions. However, at the end, you'll be able to unmute yourselves and join in thanking our guests. And the way to communicate with us this evening, if you have any comments, and of course, we certainly encourage all of your questions for Deborah, is through the chat function. So the chat box, I'll be sending through a couple of messages and helpful links for where to purchase the book this evening. So just keep an eye out for those. So let me go now. So in conversation this evening, so we welcome Deborah Oswald for The Family Doctor, her new book that we will be discussing. And in conversation is Cass Moriarty. Cass is the author of The Promised Seed and Parting Words. She is also a literary judge, a reviewer, and a regular interviewer for Avid Reader Zoom events. So you definitely might have seen her face on the screen before. Though this is her first in a while, she mentions, and we've missed her very much. So we're delighted to have you back, Cass, and a very warm Avid Reader welcome to you, Cass and Deborah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bianca. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another Avid Reader online Zoom event. My first in a while because I've been unwell. So it's been, I think, nearly 6 months. So this is really great to get back into it. I've missed it. And as usual, Avid Reader is bringing together readers, writers, and the literary community in only the way that only they can. Very importantly, the traditional owners of this country have been celebrating storytelling for thousands of years, just as we're doing tonight. And I acknowledge the Turrbal and Yagara people here in Brisbane and recognise all elders and their continuing connection to the land here and wherever you may be on country in Australia, or perhaps even overseas. Maybe we have some overseas people. Online events and social media have been keeping authors, publishers and booksellers thriving during this pandemic. So if you enjoy tonight's event, please spread the word, buy the book, follow our authors and help support the writing community. Tonight, we're thrilled to welcome to Avid author, playwright and screenwriter, Deborah Oswald. You may best know Deborah for her creation of the award-winning television series Offspring, but she's also written episodes for other TV programs. She's penned plays and books for children and 2 other novels. I particularly loved Useful, which was published in 2015. I can highly recommend that one. Her stage plays for adults have been performed around the world and shortlisted for the New South Wales Premier's Literary Awards. This year, Deborah will perform her one-woman show called Is There Something Wrong with That Lady?, which sounds darkly intriguing as a title. In Deborah's new novel, The Family Doctor, which I have here, beautiful cover, she asks the question, would you take a life to save a life? As she examines the issue of violence against women and children and how far we might go to rectify a bad situation if we had the means and the opportunity. It's a thought-provoking book about women's friendship and their anger. It's about love and grief. And it also manages to be a gripping and page-turning story of suspense. Welcome, Deborah.
Thank you, Cass. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Oh, well, coming in whatever sense it is.
That's it. We're all coming from our bedrooms or our lounge rooms. So, Deborah, this novel is, as we were just saying before we started, so timely at the moment. And I think you mentioned it was timely when you started writing it, and unfortunately it's still timely now. And I think that it will resonate with many readers because of what is actually going on in the world, in our own country at the moment. I wanted to start by asking you to introduce us to the three friends at the centre of this story, Paula, Stacy and Anita, and where they each are at the beginning of the novel in their lives.
Yeah, so there's three women who've been friends since, have been a trio since they were 12 years old and have stayed, you know, in that solid female friendship way that some women have. Paula is a suburban GP, dedicated, beloved by her patients, recently widowed, a very kind of calm person who fixes everybody else's problems in the world. Her other best friend is Anita, who's a court journalist, a journalist who covers the court system, who's a much more kind of impulsive, slightly scatty person, very boisterous and affectionate and likeable, who covers lots of murder trials. And then the third member of the trio is Stacy, who is a preschool teacher who married a man who's quite controlling and needy and had two little kids with him. And she's been living on a very remote property with him. Do you want me to go into what happens next, Cass?
Yeah, I think just for the audience, we're not going to give away any spoilers about the plot as it progresses, but there is an incident at the beginning.
Sure. And this is a spoiler, yeah.
It's not a spoiler because it's right at the beginning of the novel, and it really is what the novel is about. So I think talk about that.
So Stacey has left her violent husband with the children and has been living in Paula's house just for, for 6 months while she gets on her feet. And so Paula's become very fond of the children, helping her friend get her life together. Paula comes home from the family surgery where she works to find Stacey shot dead, both the children shot dead, and the estranged husband has found them and is prowling through the house with a rifle and shoots himself in the head in front of Paula. So it's not what you'd call a cheerful beginning.
Shocking. It's a shocking beginning.
Shockingly familiar. Like there are so many stories that we don't have to kind of say it's any one particular story because it could be so many. So the book begins with this terrible crime. It's funny, I'm feeling quite emotional just talking about it. You would think after spending all this time writing the book, I would be kind of immune to it, but it still gets to me. So Paula is traumatised right from the beginning and also burdened with the guilt of feeling, should I have protected them better? Should I have known this might happen? So that's what propels Paula through the rest of the book.
Mm-hmm. And I want to say to potential readers that even though the book has some really shocking content, and that opening or near to opening scene is an example of it, I think that what you do really well is the way that you manage the relationships and the communication and the language and the love and the other things in the book that keeps it balanced so that it's not there's some shocking things that happen, but it's not a terribly distressing book.
Thank you for saying that. It was very important to me. Two things were very important to me. First of all, that the book not be titillating. I personally don't particularly like books that are all about, the slicing up of women's bodies in basements. Like, I really don't like that, where there's a kind of titillating quality to it. Mm-hmm. There's nothing like that. I was very careful to avoid that. And the other thing that was important to me was to make sure that there are beautiful things in the book, like beautiful female friendship, the glory of little children. There's a love story where there's a man and a woman who are respectful and tender and sexy, because we worry about the safety of the women and children because those precious things are at stake. So it was really important. You can't tell the story without that stuff being in the world of the book at the same time.
Yep, that's very true. So in the story, there are three separate but really meaningful situations that all sort of tie together. So the first is, as we've mentioned, the tragic death of Stacey and her children. But tell us about the other two situations. One is Paula's initial meeting with a patient of hers, Rochelle, and the other is about the Santino trial, which Anita, the journalist, is covering.
So when Paula is still dealing with her trauma about the death of her friend and the children, a patient comes into her surgery, as would happen to GPs often, a woman who's clearly being strangled and threatened by her husband, who's very controlling and has the means to track her and has threatened to track her if she ever leaves again. And she has a 6-year-old son, this woman. So Paula is then obsessed with trying to find solutions, trying to work through all the systems she can. And then some other things happen that I won't explain that sort of ramp up the emotional temperature for Paula. So then when the next day, the husband of this woman who's in danger, Rochelle's husband, comes into the surgery, and he's a creep, and he's controlling and violent and a bully and makes veiled threats, and Paula kind of tests him a bit. And she thinks about the fact that the only way this woman is going to be safe is if this man is not in the picture anymore. So she considers using her medical skills to remove him from the picture, shall we say. But she hasn't gone into that day planning this. It's an opportunity that lands in front of her where she thinks, I could solve this woman's problem. I could save this woman and her child if I do this.
Particularly after what's just happened with her friend, and she's so mired in the feelings about that. Yeah.
I mean, I think what I was interested in is she's a good person, a person who sees herself as a good person, who does a very bad thing. Well, arguably, depends on your point of view. Because of the emotional situation she's in and a kind of a perfect storm of events. Yes. And this guy walking in when she's already in this heightened state. And she's a GP who's, like a lot of GPs, who is used to kind of fixing problems, seeing a problem, working out the best solution. So the best solution pops into her mind and she crosses the line.
Yeah. And I think that puts the reader in a very interesting position, because it makes us think, well, what would I do in that situation? Yeah. And the whole book is full of those moments of what would I do. Yeah. So the second situation, or the third situation then, is the Santino trial. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what's going on with that?
Yeah. So while Paula is dealing with the death of her friend, and then the fact that she's done this terrible thing, and dealing with, and I think the important thing to say is, even though characters in this book do extreme things, they're regular people. They're you or me. They respond. You know, if I killed someone, I would be terrified and remorseful and sick with worry. You know, so Paula's not a sort of TV series killer. She's you or me. Well, you or me who then does something extreme. But at the same time,
I don't know about you, but I haven't murdered anyone recently.
No, neither have I. I hasten to add, never murdered anyone. I never thought I would write a book with a murder in it, so there you are. But at the same time as Paula's dealing with all that, and the two women, Paula and Anita, are trying to support each other through this terrible period in their lives, and they're very good friends and very loving to each other. Anita is, as a journalist, covering a big murder trial of a guy who, shall I say, he's pushed he's had a very controlling, abusive relationship with this young woman, and he's chased her onto an overpass and pushed her onto the road, and he's claiming it's a suicide. So there's a big court story centerpiece to the book, in a way, where we follow how the system deals with this. And Anita is covering it, and she's trying to kind of, and it looks like this guy's going to be convicted. So Anita is sort of enjoying seeing justice play out for a woman, not her friend, but another woman in a very serious. And so we learn all about the story of this young woman and what happened to her. And the guy who's charged with the murder has a heavily pregnant new girlfriend who comes to court every day with him. So we have this sense of this other young woman, pregnant.
So throughout the story, we've got several scenarios that are all sort of related, not related, but sort of similar scenarios where we've got women and or children in danger.
Yeah.
And as we said before, the novel covers some issues that are really disquieting, uncomfortable and confronting, but that I think it does it in a really accessible way. And as you were saying before, I think that was due to the balancing act that you managed to pull off between that harsh content and the sort of lighter touch that you use to make sure that the reader sort of gets out at the other end unscathed.
Yeah. And also it's not I mean, you know, I'm not a journalist, I'm not a social researcher about the stuff, so it's not done from the point of view of let's look at domestic violence as a social phenomenon. It's about, it comes from me as an anguished observer. So my characters are anguished observers, but then I've kind of tried to make it into a story that you get hooked by, and you want to know what's going to happen next all the time to those women. And what will
that happens. That definitely happens. So that actually leads into my next question, because I was going to say that you're quoted as saying that the novel is inspired by real stories, and obviously there's no shortage of them around.
Yeah.
And you said it springs from my anguish about violence against women and the impotent rage many of us feel when we hear that yet another woman and her kids have been killed. So what do you think really inspired the idea for this novel? Was it just your, you know, was it your rage? And how did you decide to tackle it? Like, once you realised you were so angry, what did you decide to do about it?
I never thought it would be subject matter I would have a way into in narrative terms. But I think it was when I sat in bed reading about yet another crime, and I thought about, my sister's a GP, and I thought about the fact that if you're a GP, little kids are coming in, women, your job is to take care of these precious people. A lot of it is about the mentality of a caring doctor. And so I thought about, what if you had patients coming in who you knew were in danger? What would you do? So it's kind of I mean, what fiction can do that non-fiction can't do, because, you know, in non-fiction you'd have to say, don't murder people, it's a bad idea. But, which is what I believe, by the way. But I could, with fiction, I could go with a little sort of fantasy of, what if a little sort of daydream of, what if we just killed a few of those monsters before they have a chance to hurt anybody? And I think it's a way, what a thriller can do, and something slightly extreme like that can do, is be a way to express the desperation that we feel. So and play out how impossible the situation is for some women. You know, like there's lots of great refuges, and the police are not terrible. Like, the police are quite good at helping women in lots of situations, but sometimes there is no solution. And that desperation is what drives Paula. And so I wanted to give a reader a chance to kind of play out that fantasy. And of course then her life unravels, and it's a tragedy for her, really, because, you know, she's destroyed by it morally and in all sorts of other ways. But I think there's a moment where you think, yeah, let's see what happens, as a way to express the desperation.
Yeah, and it's not about revenge, is it? Really?
No, Paula she's not interested in revenge at all. Her attitude is, if once there's no way to save people, what's the point? Have them go to jail. I mean, Anita jokingly says, her friend jokingly says that Paula is engaged in preventative murder. So she's trying to stop something bad happening. So she goes to great lengths to, I mean, I hasten to add, it's not Dexter. She doesn't kill lots of people. She only, although I shouldn't say, not many people at all. But she's very careful to follow through and make sure there is no other solution. I mean, again, this is crazy thinking. This is a woman who is not, sorry, this is a woman who is not crazy, but this is a woman who is
grief-stricken.
Is grief-stricken and traumatised by what she's seen, and full of guilt, and has a wrong-headed idea that she's got to save people. And so she thinks she's being logical. I think she believes she's being logical. She knows what she's doing is wrong, and she talks about the fact that I will take that wrongness inside me if I can save those women. Is her kind of ethos. So
it's the means as a ways to the end.
Yes, even though she knows it's wrong and it will cost her hugely. I mean, it's morally arrogant too to think. I mean, Anita is kind of, her best friend is in a way our head in the story. She's more like you and me. Like she rages against all this stuff and talks big about, you know, let's kill them all. But actually she thinks what Paula is doing is horrifying, and she accuses her of moral arrogance. You know, to think that she should be the one deciding what happens, you know.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's really interesting as the story progresses, both Paula and Anita sort of become hopelessly mired in their choices, their actions, what they've done or what they haven't done, what they know,
And the
particularly in
politics of
Anita's
friendship
case.
too. I mean, one of the things I really wanted to look at in the book is the kind of dynamic between women who've been close friends for a long time, the kind of little shifts of dependence and independence, and the little resentments, you know, the sort of idea that people get cast in a certain role in the friendship, you know, I'm the sensible one, you're the impulsive one, and how that can distort people's choices and sort of mess with everything, but also underneath all of that, this rock solid support for each other. They would do anything for each other. Yeah.
And I think that because of those relationship dynamics constantly shifting as the plot progresses, it's one of those books where we can really connect with different characters at different times in the story. You know, sometimes I'm connecting with Paula, sometimes I'm connecting with Anita. And as I said before, you know, we're trying to imagine how we would act in that same circumstance. You know, when you describe the plot of the book, it seems crazy. And yet once you're in the book and the facts and the circumstances are presented, it just makes you question everything that you thought you held sacred and makes you think.
I don't want to persuade people to think what Paula does is right.
No.
But I hope that people can understand in that moment what she's been through, why she does it. I mean, that's what fiction can do so well, I think, is take you inside somebody's head. When it's working, fiction at its best takes you inside somebody's head. So somebody can do something unthinkable to us, but you think, yeah, I get it. I get why you're doing this. Don't do it. I don't want you to do it, but, you know.
So it's a pretty thin or blurred line between what we think we would do and what many of us would actually do when faced with a sort of a moral dilemma like that.
I think so. I mean, there's other moral dilemmas later in the book about do you tell, and do you do you go and
do you keep it a secret?
If your boyfriend is the police detective covering that case, what do you do? How do you continue your
relationship? How do you move forward with that?
Yeah. So I mean, and on all of those, I think, you know, I hope people will feel agonised about what they would do. Well, not agonised, that sounds too painful. Intrigued.
I think intrigued and agonised. I think it really definitely makes you think about if you were in that situation, what would you do?
What would you do? Yeah.
And, you know, if you, like the central question of the story, would you take a life to save a life? If you could be 99.9% sure that that woman was going to die, would you take action if you had the means and the opportunity?
Sure. And if you were in a room and a woman was in mortal danger and you had a big stick, obviously you would go over and hit a guy over the head with a big stick. Paula's argument is, but what if you could get in there just before? You know, I mean, it's a slippery slope, because on that basis, terror, you know, the whole sort of
anarchy,
ethical framework of that society falls apart. But the impulse, the urge, is a protective urge, and I think a lot of readers understand it even if they don't share it.
Yeah, I think so. There's a lot of themes that you look at in the book. I wanted you to talk to us a little bit about guilt and rage and revenge, and what's the, you know, what you feel is the difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think both Anita and Paula feel terrible guilt that they didn't understand quite how precarious their friend's situation was before she left her husband, when she was living with him. And all that stuff that goes on where they question her and she covers up, and they realise, you know, all that stuff about how responsible are we for other people. I think that's always very interesting, and when do you intervene and when do you not. I think there's a lot of guilt about that. And then Paula feels terribly guilty about what she's done, and guilty because she's, without explaining too much of the plot, she ends up morally compromising Anita, that Anita has shared information with her from the court and from her policeman boyfriend that Paula has used. So she's kind of morally bound Anita into it without her knowledge.
I found that one of the most disturbing parts, actually, because I thought that's a real trap. I mean, she's really spun a web around that now, and I just couldn't see how they were going to get
good, because I wanted you to think that. Rage, oh my God. I mean, I think Anita's a much more sort of demonstrative, blurting everything out person, and she talks about her rage. And I hope that's a way for a lot of angry women in the world at the moment. And if this book gives some of those women a book where they can read it and go, yes, and rage, and she's expressing that rage, well, you know, I'll be happy about that. Revenge. I'm personally not interested in revenge, and I don't think it's not a thing in the book.
It's not. It's noticeably not. You know, it's noticeably absent.
It's funny. The momentum of the book is all forward. Is all what's going to happen next. And that's a bit how I feel morally. I'm much more interested in who can we save, who's in danger now or tomorrow. I want people put away so they don't hurt anybody else. But I'm not interested in, Paula's fantasies of killing her friend's husband are all about getting in before he could do any damage, not about...
And saving her,
saving
which is impossible. It's an impossible thing.
Impossible, yeah.
So along with those themes, we've got love and we've got grief. Talk to us a little bit about those themes in the book.
Well, I love writing about love because when you're writing a book as dark as this, it's kind of nice. One of the things I really love in the book is Paula's love for the two children who've lived with her for 6 months, and she talks about the special sweetness of being allowed to love a child who isn't your child. Like, you know, I think some of us have been lucky enough that we've been friends with someone, or I've got my own children, but there's a kind of special relationship you can have with a kid who isn't your kid, but circumstances mean that you have this relationship with them and you've been given the chance to love them. And I think that's beautiful. And I guess in a way, in a little microcosm, it's how I feel about, I want to protect all the children in the world. I know that's not possible. And the other thing that was really important to me was that there be a romantic relationship between men and women that is respectful
and healthy
and still sexy and not perfect, but because, you know, I am married to a person of the male persuasion. I have sons. I now have a grandson. I feel very warmly towards men, and I wanted to make clear that. And one of the other lots of love in the book is in the court case that the friends of the young woman who was killed, coming and testifying and talking about how much they loved her. I really enjoyed writing that because, it would make me cry every single time. But the idea of honouring your friend by coming and talking about her life and how glorious she was and what was stolen from the world. It's really important that there be lots of gorgeous stuff in there to remind us why it matters. And then the love between Anita and Paula it's strong. I test it very harshly. I put them through the ringer.
You do. Yeah, you do.
But I hope that the love between them is believable and strong.
It is. And the grief in the book too is not, you don't only explore the obvious grief of, the death of Stacey and her children, but there's the grief that Paula feels for her husband too, who she wasn't married to for very long.
No.
And, she lost too soon. And that's another really interesting, even though it's sad, it's sort of a beautiful sadness in that kind of grief.
And becomes this thing that she's never properly, because I know a lot of doctors who are very good at, I'm all right, I fix everybody else's problems, and they're not very good at admitting their own need for help. And so she's a bit in that mode. She's always been everybody, the fixer for everybody else. So she's never properly dealt with the grief that she feels about the loss of her husband. So when these other traumas land on top of that, it's landing on shaky ground. It was also very important to me, actually. It's funny because I was thinking about it's funny thinking back to why you choose to do things the way you do. It was really important to me that Paula not have children and not have a partner, so that the choices that she makes are on her. You know, like if she had children she had to look after, she wouldn't risk doing what she does.
No.
But the cost is only to her. Well, it turns out to be a cost to Anita as well, but she's thinking, I'm going to do this terrible thing, but I'm going to bear the consequences and me alone. And I couldn't risk a story where you thought, but what about your kids? That's why I did that, actually.
The character of Rochelle, who's Paula's patient, who comes in, who's obviously being abused by her husband, but doesn't want to sort of say anything. There's a quote, something that she says in the novel that I just loved. She says, "The thing is, when you've been in a situation for so long, it feels like that's normal life. Well, even if you know it's not normal, it's how things are. But then something changes and it's like, I remember this. This is what safe feels like." I love that whole paragraph, and I'm sure that resonates with so many women, because it's like the frog in the boiling water. You don't sort of realize how bad it is until it's too bad to get out of it. You can't disentangle yourself from the situation. I wanted to ask you whether there were any particular real life cases that sort of informed the novel, how you felt specifically at the time that you heard about them or read about them, whether you felt, impotent or full of rage or...
all of the above. For research for the book, I read a judge's... there was a judge-only trial here of a murder case where there was like a 50-page report by the judge, which is almost like a sort of, not a transcript of the trial, but it's like taking you through the trial. And I talked to a whole lot of coroners and magistrates and people and lawyers that I know about it. And I wanted to be careful that there was no one story that it was exactly like, because I didn't want it to become messed up by people saying, oh, that's that. I mean, if the stories in the book ring bells for people, that's good, I think, because that will remind you, hopefully, of how you felt when you heard that story. But, I mean, the sad truth is there are so many stories that could ring those bells. And
do you think that the sort of general impotence that we feel, I mean, obviously that's a fairly common reaction. What do you think that women can do, or that we as a society can do to empower women from those abusive relationships?
I mean, it's not my area of expertise, but I think that there's a lot of work going on at the moment to try and have coercive control become a criminal charge.
Yes.
And so that you can step in before it becomes, because the pattern's very similar in lots of stories about how it goes. So there's that. In a longer term way, I guess we try and bring up our girls so that they hold themselves at high value, and we bring up our boys so that they respect women and don't want to hurt them. I think we need, well, I don't want to spoil the end, but I think we need sort of a crisis system that allows for the fact that men can track women. There's so many stories about men using all kinds of very simple devices that anybody can get to track women, so that even if they go to a refuge, they're still in danger. So I think in the immediate terms of women, keeping women safe, and sorry, this is so awful, isn't it? It's so heavy. And then the family court needs to function better, so that women aren't at risk because they have to play along with the family court or be declared uncooperative. And
I think they're all really valid points, and they're all issues that you know, that the book brings up, and that it makes, you know, you think about all of those sorts of things.
But I suppose, I mean, I wanted to make the story one where nobody's behaving that badly. Like the police are doing their best. Like the police aren't, I didn't want it to make it a story about obvious police inertia or incompetence. It's just that sometimes the situations are just...
It's one of those slipping through the cracks.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's change tack for a bit. Because as a writer, I'm really interested in your craft and your process, especially because you write across so many areas. So you do screenwriting for television, you do plays and theatre, and obviously you also write novels. So what's your favourite form?
I know it sounds obvious, it's like saying, what's your favourite child? I don't have a favourite, because what I like is jumping around between them, and they all have their great bits.
What do you like about each one then? So, what's the best thing about each one?
Theatre is, I don't write theatre anymore, but theatre is, there's something really amazing about being in the room with an audience, watching them respond to your story and meet your characters in the room.
In real time.
There's no other form like that where you can see people laugh or gasp or lean forward because of something that's happened. And that's like rocket fuel. The trouble is theatre is such a sort of tough business that you don't get the rocket fuel very often. What I love about television is you get to play with other people. There's incredible camaraderie. A writer's room on a show is just the most incredible fun in the world.
I was going to ask you about the writer's room versus the obviously solitary work of writing a novel.
If you're in a good writer's room with smart, funny, generous people, it's just, it's heaven on a stick. And then the idea that clever people come on and act it and film it and make it look gorgeous, like fantastic. But of course, the difficulty with that is you're answerable to lots of people. You're answerable to the network. You're answerable to actors. My character wouldn't say that line. You're answerable to budget and the weather and all kinds of things. So I love doing television, and I hope I will continue to do television. The downside about writing novels is that it's a bit lonely. I mean, obviously, if I want company, I can go and ring up one of my friends, but the kind of creative fellowship of television where you're sharing the process of thinking up the story with other people, there's none of that with a novel. So the solitude of it can sometimes be quite hard. Then again, you've got that control. I can just take an idea and think, let me just try this. I don't know if it's going to work. I'm just going to run with this idea. And obviously down the track, I'm answerable to publishers and I'm answerable to readers if I get that far. But I've just given it my best shot. And there's something very nice about that. And the playing with language is really enjoyable. I mean, I don't write flowery prose. I don't particularly like writing that draws attention to itself as, oh, look, this is writing. But that doesn't mean that I don't spend a lot of time trying to find the exactly precise word for a moment and which details we need when. And I really enjoy that. I really enjoy the craft of that. Yeah.
So it sounds like you know, in each situation you're grappling with sort of different difficulties and different joys.
Yeah, but then in another sense they're all the same in that I'm trying to make characters that are plausible and intriguing, and a story that is exciting and surprising, but still you think, I get that, you know, like,
and people that characters that we care about, you know, which is the most important.
That's my big thing always. I don't know how else you could write any other way, really. And the process is often the same. Like I write file cards. Here they are. My file cards. I write
one you prepared earlier.
I write each beat of a story on a file card and I lay them out on the table, whether it's a book or an episode of television, and I think about the order in which things are happening and have I got things in the right order, and do we learn this too soon, and is this too slow, and you know, the process is a...
Do you have a whiteboard as well? Do you use a whiteboard or a pinboard? Or
not at home. I do in a writer's room. But at home, I have my magical cards. So, look, I don't know. Writers, we have no tools, do we? So
No.
all we've got. So I have an English writer friend, and whenever I get myself into a state about something I'm working on, he says, "Calm down, go and buy stationery." And so I go to Officeworks. Oh, do you have Officeworks in Queensland?
Yes.
So I go into Officeworks. It's like being in a cathedral. And I come home with piles of stationery, and I think I can do anything now.
Exactly. And are they all still sitting in piles beside your desk?
No.
I actually use it.
Yes, I use the file cards, and I mean, I think that there's a bit of trickery in your own mind. Like, actually, the file cards are not solving the problem, but it's just the fact you've got up off your bum, gone somewhere, come back, and while you've been doing that, stuff's been cooking in your head. Yeah. You know.
Yeah.
So
we're going to go to questions from the audience in a moment, but just before we do that, I wanted to touch on one other subject. Now, you and your partner Richard Glover are owned by a dog called Clancy.
Yeah. I was going to say, is he on the floor, but he's outside? No,
he's not there. He's not making an appearance.
No.
I recently interviewed Richard, and it seems that Clancy much prefers you to him. In fact, he takes a rather dim view of the male in the house. Richard is, of course, also a journalist. How does it work with two creative people in the house, creative and successful people living together in the same space? Does your work sort of overlap, or do you keep fairly strict boundaries, or how does all that play out?
Well, I mean, I've been a writer since I was 20, and I've been with him since I was 20. So I know no other life. So if we're doing it wrong, I don't know. So he goes off and does a radio show every day, but he's often here working in the morning on books or newspaper columns. So sometimes we're both in our little workspaces. I'm pointing because that's his room back there. We're often working together, and we leave each other alone, but he reads drafts for me. Mm-hmm. I'll read a draft of a column for him. Quite often when we're walking the dog, I'll say, I've got this story problem, I don't know what to do. And I'll tell him about it. And often he won't say much, but just the process of explaining it to him, I'll solve the problem. He's a very good first reader. One of the risks in our family, because Richard writes a column once a week in the Sydney Morning Herald, so about family life. So the pressure to come up with an idea every week means that if anything interesting happens in our family, we all dive on it. So sometimes I have to say, you can't have that. I want that. So
there's some boundaries.
Yes. So years ago, my son was in a soccer team that had this kind of interesting story when he was 10. And out of that one soccer season, my son wrote a short story that won a national short story competition. Richard wrote 2 newspaper columns, and I wrote a novel called The Redback Leftovers for children, which was in print 20 years later. So anything interesting lands on the floor in our household, it's picked clean like a carcass.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Within a few days.
Soccer would be so good for the arts.
I don't know how I kept going without a supportive partner. You know, having somebody who can listen to you when you're whinging and get excited about an idea with you.
And understand, I guess,
process
when things go wrong. And
it's pretty, I know that I'm a lucky duck.
Yeah. And why do you think Clancy prefers you to him?
I don't know that that's true. Clancy's with me all day, right, because I work at home. He certainly listens to me. I think in the book, I think Richard talks about the fact that Clancy listens to me and does what I tell him more. But arguably, he loves Richard. He's more sooky about Richard. Like in the mornings in bed, he jumps into bed, he's sort of all over Richard. And, it's like, oh, what am I? Chopped liver. Well, actually, if I was chopped liver, he'd probably quite like it.
Yeah, he would like to. He'd prefer you there.
So Clancy and I do a lot of walking together. We sort out a lot of story problems. And then
he's a useful dog.
He's very, very useful. Yeah. Dogs are good.
Perfect. All right,
he's got chili. Chili helps, doesn't he? Yes.
That's Bianca's.
Yes, that's Chili's. Yes, and I'm definitely the favourite, but don't tell my partner.
Well, we might go to some questions, Bianca, if we have any.
Yes, we have had one through from Carolyn. Thank you so much, Carolyn, for sending your question. So Carolyn would like to know, Deborah, how you came into writing for screen. Did it stem from a novel or another way?
So when I was at university, well, when I was a little kid, like when I was a teenager, I wrote plays from when I was like 12 onwards. And through university, I wrote radio plays and sold them to the ABC and supported myself at uni. So I sort of started making a living as a writer when I was 17. And then when I finished university, I went and did a year at the Australian Film and Television School in Sydney. Like there was a 1-year writing course. And so right from the beginning, I liked the idea of writing theatre and TV, because I loved it. Like, apart from the fact that you can make a living, you can earn an income writing television. I really love television, and I love, reaching a big audience. That's incredibly satisfying. And then quite early on, I wrote a children's script that didn't get made for television, and I thought, this is a good story. So I wrote it as a novel, and it got published. So then I thought, oh, this is something I can do as well. So I was writing kids' books all through my children's childhood. And then when I finished Offspring, I felt like my creative flywheel was spinning fast. So I wrote my first grown-ups novel. And it's a good mix. Like sometimes the politics of one of the fields drives you crazy. And so you think, that's it, no more television, I'm going to write novels. And then back again, and So we are, I've sold the rights of this to a producer, and I've written a pilot script, so we're hoping to make it for television. But
congratulations.
Well, we'll see, we'll see. But
early days, but
yeah, exactly. But the good thing is the story exists, and people I've told it the way I think it should be told, and people can read it. So whatever happens, happens. But I
think that's a really important lesson for the writers out there. I think about, when you talk about that you wrote a screenplay for children and it wasn't working, and so you turned it into a novel. I think that's a really valuable lesson about being flexible with your work, and looking at different forms that maybe you're just writing in the wrong form. Maybe the story itself is good, but you've got it in the wrong form.
So when I started writing television, because I'm enormously old, and I started writing television in the kind of early 1980s. So it was different then, and I came into it via theatre, but actually it's still the case. Quite a lot of the writers, because on Offspring we used to try and give new writers a go all the time, and one of the guys who became one of the absolute main writers on the show had only ever written theatre before he wrote television. So I think if somebody has the right kind of story sense, and they can write good characters and they can write good dialogue, the technical stuff, you can teach somebody that very quickly, actually, is my view.
We've also got a question here. Thank you, everyone, by the way, for the questions. Keep them coming. Sarah would like to know, Deborah, how you research your ideas. She says there is just so much subject matter for the family doctor. How did you know when to write rather than research?
Oh, that's a really good question. I did a batch of research before I really got going. I suppose I had some scenarios in my head, and so I went to medical people and legal people and said, what do you reckon? If I do this, is that plausible? Is that roughly right? And then I read lots of court transcripts. I went and sat in some murder trials. There's nothing to compare with that kind of real world research where you sit in a room and there's details that you wouldn't have thought to look up or ask somebody that you just soak in. And so then when you're back at your computer, you can picture the whole thing. I'm a big believer in real world research. Like for useful, I enrolled in a TAFE course in asbestos removal, and I have my certificate in the removal of non-friable asbestos because my character was doing that, so I did it.
That's above and beyond, Deborah.
Well, it was actually really fun. But so then I'm kind of starting to work on the story, but then I'll realise that actually I need some more information here, so I'll stop and I'll go and research that thing. If you looked at my Google search history at the moment, it's what is a lethal dose of
we'd be worried.
Yeah, what does it really feel like to strangle someone and all this kind of It's a wonder that I haven't had the police knocking on the door. So some of it you can get on the internet. And then once I'd written a rough draft, I got a doctor to read it, and I got 2 lawyers I know to read it, one of whom is a former coroner, and say, have I got this right? Tell me what if things are implausible, and so that really helped as well. So I don't know, I guess there's a point at which you've got to commit to the story that you're telling, and then, because it's very easy to get swept away by research too much, there's a point at which you have to commit, this is the story, and then I'll just check things as I need them, you know.
Great. No, thank you so much for that level of detail. I really, yeah, I'm very interested in that side of things as well, Deborah. So thank you for sharing.
I think I can say about research is that, and I say this when I talk to school kids about writing too, is that most people are really helpful. You know, most people are narcissists. They want to talk about themselves. So for one of my plays that's about set on a peach farm, I went and found this peach farmer, and I followed him around the peach farm for 2 days asking him questions. And he said to me at one point, "You're really interested in peaches, aren't you?" And I went, "Yes, I am." And people are very happy to talk. If, you know, I say to kids, be confident. Go up to somebody and say, "Hello, I'm writing a story about a museum attendant. Can you tell me what it's like to be a museum attendant?" And most people will help you, and they'll say stuff. The other thing is, I really love the kind of research where you talk to people you know, but about you ask them questions that you haven't ever asked them and hear what they say. So I said to a lot of my women friends, this is the scenario, what would you do? What would you think? And, you know, people tell you stuff. You know, you just have to sit down and talk to people, and gold will come out of their mouths.
Good story fodder. So talking about sharing stories and I guess, yeah, what it's like to be in the writer's room as well. Carolyn would like to know if you could perhaps share some stories about what it was like to be in the writer's room of Offspring.
Well, that was about as good as it ever gets, because first of all, it was my show. So I was the sort of, I wasn't the boss, but because the producers were the bosses, but I was sort of, you know, but the best thing about it was that I had these 2 amazing, well, I say young, they're in their 40s now, but they were young then, younger than me, 2 amazing guys who came on it right from the beginning, never written television before, and they were brilliant and stayed with it for the 5 series that I did. And then every series was 13 episodes, so we would, at the beginning of a series, I would develop a whole lot of material, and I would bring it in, and we would have like 3 or 4 days of just like really general brainstorming for the whole series. We would talk about what big stuff do we want to do this series. And then when we plot out individual episodes, you might have a new writer that you're trying out on the show, because we had me and the 2 other guys would do 3 each. I would always do episode 1, episode 13, and another one. And then we had 4 scripts that we would give to new people so that we could give new people a try. And so you just sit in a room and you have huge whiteboards and you write ideas, and then you plot out the episode, and you just talk and talk and talk. And it's kind of interesting the way it's a bit like improv comedy, where you need the attitude to be yes and, like you shouldn't block people. You know, if someone says, what about this idea? Everyone needs to run with it. But then again, you also need somebody who's sitting back and then at some point goes, you know, the problem with that idea is this. So you need to kind of have both mechanisms happening at once. And for people to be generous and not, do you get to the point where nobody cares about whose idea it was? And then once you've plotted out an individual episode, that writer goes away by themselves and writes it. So, you know, everyone is responsible for their own episode. And then we all read it, and then you have to sort of adjust the scripts back and forth so that it fits with this episode as a whole. But we would, you know, after a while, with a show that ran for, you know, 65 episodes, before I left, that you know those characters so well, and we all had views about what should happen to them and things we wanted to do to them. And, you know, like an idea would happen, like when the dog in the show got arthritis, the actual dog, we decided we have to write the dog out. So we decided we'd have to kill him. And, you know, we were all dog lovers, so that we were all weeping in the story room, thinking about the fact that we were going to have to kill Rocket. But then we thought, well, you know what, it's a good story though. Like, that's the thing about writers. We're sort of, I mean, I think, was it Graham Greene? He said we have this the ice in the heart. There's a little, you know, like we felt bad about killing the dog, but we also thought, ooh, this is good story. So
I think we need writers' rooms for novelists.
You know what? Why not? I mean, I've done writers' rooms for movies where I'm not going to write the movie. I'm just helping out the writer who's going to write the movie. And there's a kind of, you know, more than the sum of its parts thing that can happen that is just gold. I mean, I would certainly, one of my main colleagues from Offspring, he didn't help me with this book, but with the television series, which I will write, he's been in the room with me and we've talked about story. Because why wouldn't you pick the brains of someone who's clever? And stuff happens when you're talking to someone else that doesn't happen when you're by yourself.
Yeah. They're just bouncing the ideas back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would certainly love the idea of a writer's room.
Yeah, it's good.
So we have a comment as well, and I am aware of the time. We are getting very close to our finishing up time, but I would love to share this comment from Diane, who said, as a 40-year member of Zonta International, who has been working on prevention of violence against women, I can't wait to read this very relevant book for our times. Despite all the work that has been done for so long, I will be recommending it even before reading it. Thank you for writing it and challenging us, Deborah.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you. And thank you for the work you do. Yes.
I think, I think that challenging us, I think that's a really important point. I think that's what this book does. The Family Doctor, again, here's the cover. Deborah's got quite a few dozen of them behind you.
Well,
I don't know why I'm holding one up.
One of them is just a little cardboard thing that someone gave me at a bookshop.
Look, it's an absolutely gripping novel. I think it'll provoke a lot of discussion amongst readers about right and wrong, about the difference between law and justice, about the ethics of taking matters into your own hands if the police or the legal systems are failing you. And for any book club people out there, I think this will certainly generate a lot of discussion if you choose this as your book of the month for book club. I think it'll create a lot of discussion. So thank you so much, Deborah, for being so generous and sharing all of your insights with us, not only about the content of the story, the violence against women, but also your craft and your process in your work. So thank you.
And thanks everyone for listening in this weird way we do things now. And thank you, Bianca, for being the technical goddess.
That's my absolute pleasure. Absolutely. Yeah, no problems at all. It has been a delight. Thank you so much, Deborah and Cass. And I would just like to say from Avid Reader on behalf of us, congratulations on the publication of The Family Doctor, and we only wish you the very best for its future success, and yes, book clubs to come. I will be sending everyone just a little email after this for where, again, you can purchase a copy of the book via Avid Reader's website or pop-in store. We also do postage, and certainly we'll be able to share with you in the coming weeks a YouTube, on our YouTube channel, the recording of the event where you can share that beyond as well and enjoy it again. So on that note, 7:30, thank you very, very much, and have a lovely Friday evening, everyone. Be sure to find out what we're up to on Twitter at AvidReader4101, and also our website, which has an array of events coming up. So we'll look forward to seeing you then, and all the best. Now I'm going to let everyone unmute themselves and go. So we'll all be able to join in a big round of applause. So if you can, please do turn on your video and join us by unmuting. Should be able to do that. I'll just see if everyone can do that.
No, everybody's muted.
Everyone's muted.
Everybody's muted.
There we go.
Oh, some people are not.
Thank you.
Got everyone there now.
Thank you, everybody.
Don't hold back your applause.
Bye, guys. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Bye,
Really
guys.
well done, everybody. That was great.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Deborah.
It's lovely. Great. Well done.
Thanks, Fiona.
Thank you. Lovely to see you all.
Yeah, there is everyone. Hello, there's everyone.
Hello. Hello. It's nice. It's nice to see
weird,
everybody.
So weird.
Everybody's popping up. Oh, hello.
Not time.
Very